Okay, I'm here with my good friend and all-round legend in the fitness game, Steve Cotter. Welcome to the show, Steve.
What's up, Adrian? Thanks. So great to be with you.
Uh,
Nice to see you, brother.
Absolutely. Come here, Steve. Could you give our listeners just a small background on first of all, your athletic career and then your transition into coaching and where you are today?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So I turned 50 this year in January. So I've entered the second half century. And so an overview from the beginning, if you will. At 12 years old, I started traditional Chinese martial arts training. And that was my entry into the world of physical culture. I was very consumed and involved in that for the better part of about 20 years. That was my first profession, teaching martial arts as a teenager and, training all day. And that really set the foundation for me in terms of my movement philosophy and, my skill sets. Along the way during my Chinese Kung Fu days. Also, I was exposed to, so it's internal martial arts. So I was exposed to the Qigong and the meditations, Taoist meditations, the use of, herbal liniments, even bone setting and massage. That was all part of the curriculum, as well as the punching and the kicking and the forms and the sparring and all the other martial art things, right? So it's like a family style where you learn you learn the fighting, you learn the healing together. And then in my late 20s, it became apparent that I wasn't going to be continuing on that path for the rest of my life, because I started teaching part-time when I was 15. By the time I was, 18, 19, that was my full-time. And I did that through, for the next decade. And then, now start as a boy. Now I'm a man. And okay, well, I guess I'm not going to be teaching Kung Fu for the rest of my life as my profession, so now what? And then I decided, well, let me get some academic. I have a lot of, experience, but let me get the other side. And so when I was 27, I went to university and I studied and got my degree, my bachelor's in kinesiology. And so as I'm coming out of, 2001, I had my kinesiology degree. I'm 31 years old at that point, and I'm looking at the landscape and, okay, how am I going to make my living? The mother of my children, my wife at that time, she was a school teacher. So she was working, as a school teacher full time. I was going to college full time. Then I'm like, okay, now what? And I'm just surveying the landscape. I'm going to be a personal trainer, right? That's kind of the natural. So start doing that, start working in local gyms. And, I always have my eye on bigger. That's my mindset. I look forward. We have time-space continuum. So, we have the present, and that's what we operate in. And we can look back, so to speak, which we call the past, memories. And we can look forward, so to speak, which we can call future think or goal setting, right? So I'm a guy that looks forward. That's what I do. And bigger, more, what's next, and there's pros and cons to all these things, right? But that's just my nature. So I'm thinking, what's next? Okay, personal training. At the same time, in that period, in the year 2000, and this is an important part of my history, I met a guy who's one of my closest friends. We've been friends for 20 years now, David Weck, and he's the inventor of the Bosu. And a lot of the listeners may not know who David Weck is, but I would venture to say that most, if not all, know what a Bosu is. And if you don't know it by name, you've seen it. It's the blue half ball that's in almost every gym around the world except for the CrossFit boxes, and it's in every therapy clinic around the world. And it's evergreen product because it's still being used all over the world. And so I met David, when he was early on. He had that invention, and he was still making them by hand, literally cutting Swiss balls in half and stapling and gluing and duct taping to a base. And so I started working with David in 2000, going to all the big trade shows in the US, the IDEA, the URSA, club industry, all these fitness trade shows. And that was very developmental. I was training a lot in balance. And, David is, I would say, the foremost person in terms of locomotion and balance. He really understands it on a very deep level. And, coming from an athletic background. And, so working a lot on the balance with the Bosu and creative movement. And shortly after that, about a year later, I started seeing these advertisements. So I'm in my last year of university at this point, and I start seeing advertisements in this little martial art catalog about kettlebells. And what's this kettlebell thing? And it's Pavel and this kind of Russian special forces, ad copy type of promotion. And something caught my eye about the kettlebell, and I was like, this looks interesting. Never seen it before, never touched it. And just the martial artist in me was like, this makes sense, because I had been going to the gym, and, lifting weights and doing that stuff. And yeah, okay, the muscles, whatever, gets shaped, but I never felt like the time in the gym was really transferring into the martial art, because it's totally different. In the traditional gym type of workouts, you're working muscle groups and, a lot of isolation of single joints. In martial arts, it's whole body expression, if you're going to be effective with it. And, at that time, I didn't realize weightlifting also it's whole body, but, the education wasn't there. The education is like, okay, this is the bicep and you do this, now we understand if I can use my whole body, I can also get a stronger curl or whatever exercise I'm doing. But so I saw this kettlebell, and it just intuitively, like, this looks right. But it was very small. It was, mail order. There was no traditional channels, and they were quite expensive. At least at that point in my life, I didn't have, discretionary income to spend on curiosities. So I waited, and every 4 months, this quarterly, I would get it, and I'd see the kettlebell, and I'd like, man, I want to get that. But I didn't bite the bullet to come up with the money for a while. Meanwhile, in this same period, again, we're talking like 2001, 2002, I was still teaching martial arts part-time. I was going to university during the week, teaching martial arts part-time just at the park down the street from my house, and I had students that were coming. And so I brought the catalog there one week, hey, check this out. This looks cool. 2 weeks later, one of the guys shows up. He's all
So
right.
we had a little technical glitch there. Steve is back in. Sorry about that, Steve.
Hey, all good.
Yeah, we're good.
So
Yeah.
where we left off, this guy shows up with 2 weeks later. One of my martial kung fu students shows up with a couple kettlebells. So I pick it up. I'm like, I never had training on. I was just doing what I saw in the picture, So I swing it, and I'm right away felt it from the ground up. Your stance, your root connecting through the earth. Boom! It's like throwing a punch. And I was like, man, this is amazing. So then I ordered right away. Same day I go home, I order my own kettlebells. The guy burns me. I'm acknowledging, but I think the statute of limitation is expired now, because it was almost 20 years ago. But he burned off a pirated copy of the VHS tape, and gave it to me. So I'm following. Pavel's doing his first video when he was just kind of starting on the scene. And I'm following the exercises, and I learn it quickly, because I had 20 years of martial art training at this point. I knew how to move, and so I start training kettlebells on my own. I get a 16 kilo, 3 days later, I'm like, I need something heavier. I order a 24 kilo, then a couple more weeks later, I order a 32. And, so I'm doing it, and I'm training for, just on my own. maybe a year. And then, doing the personal training, I start bringing kettlebells with me to the gym where I'm working. And, they don't have any kettlebells, and start using it with my clients. After about a year doing the personal training thing, I'm like, this isn't for me. I'm not a corporate guy. And, wake up at 5 a.m., make sure the place has towels, and then try to walk around the floor and sell private training, sales to people while they're on the treadmill. That's just, I wasn't doing it for me. So I'm like, I'm going to do in-home training. I tell, my clients, like, I'm leaving and I'm going to start doing, and, so number of those clients, I started going to their home because it's an affluent area, people that only affluent people have gyms in their home and personal trainers coming to train them, right? That's not that's a luxury item there. So I was doing that, driving and bringing kettlebells and, Bosu and a couple other tools with me in the car. And, so I guess it was 2003. There's this event in San Diego, which is my home base. And, it's like Pavel does this tactical strength challenge. It's like pull-ups and pistol squats and snatch with the 32 kilo. And there was some great, some really good guys there that day. And I was there, and, the pistol, that's one of my strengths that I built my career upon, the one-legged squat, which, in the Kung Fu days, we call that the crane dip. So I used to do, 70, 80 reps per leg at a pop without stopping. And then, kind of got out of the habit after years of doing that, doing thousands. And then I see, Pavel in the Dragon Door world, they're touting the amazing, pistol squat. And if you can do one, you're a mutant. So, I pick up this, I do 15 on, 15 on each leg. And, so right away, Paul was like, man, this is, we connected. He invites me out. 1 month later is the RKC. So I go out there to the RKC in Minnesota. Pavel and I connect further. And he's like, I want you to, come back in June and be one of my assistant instructors. And, so that kind of got me into the kettlebell world. And it just went from there, so, hey, make a video, you should make a video. You're the Kung Fu guy. And, so make a video with kettlebells meets Kung Fu, so I do full contact kettlebells, my first DVD in 2004. And, what do? Well, you start a website. I mean, this was the beginning of this whole fitness on the internet. It didn't really exist before that era, because that started with, like, Matt Fury was one of the very first guys with combat conditioning, where you set up, I'm not talking gyms or studios. Jane Fonda had the stay-at-home step aerobics. You had Taibo. Those were at-home kind of follow-along format, which had started in the 70s, but in terms of, like, there was no Facebook. YouTube was just starting, so that was the very early. And Matt Fury was, I don't know if he was the very first. Actually, the very first, I know him, it's a guy named Rocco Castellano, the very first guy to make money selling fitness on the internet. He basically was selling, he took copies, laminated copies of the program with permission from Bill Pearl's bodybuilding book. And he was selling those programs for, whatever, a couple dollars. And he made $1 million doing that. And that was back in 1990, I think 6 or 7. So to my knowledge, he was the first guy. But, Matt Fury was one of the first. He had this book. And then you had, some other guys. And Dragon Door was very early on as one of the first that were. And it was totally different, because in the past, you go to the sporting goods store and you buy your dumbbell or your bench or whatever equipment. It wasn't that you go to the internet.
Yeah.
And, so it was very non-traditional. And I saw what these guys were doing. And I was early on, Pavel, first generation before me. And I'm in that next wave of the early pioneers, Mike Mahler, Steve Maxwell. We were in that, kind of the first guys that stepped into Pavel's inner circle, the lions in the den, so to speak. and he built himself a team of guys that were, you know, capable, and we helped him to teach, you know, in the early days when there was just one kettlebell style, one kettlebell source. You know, the Russians weren't even on the internet at that point, you know. So we didn't know anything about kettlebell sport or the whole world or the juggling. It was, you know, very different time. And, you know, so I saw what people were doing, and I did that. I make a DVD, I make a website, shopping cart, and now I'm on the internet, you know, and I'm getting emails. Hey, I love your video, you know, come out here and do a workshop, come out. So I started doing workshops in 2004 around US. 2005, I connect with a company and make a bigger project called the Encyclopedia of Kettlebell Lifting, which was, you know, 6 DVDs, 9 hours of, you know, almost 200 different techniques. That was very, you know, very well received. The producer was putting a lot of clips on YouTube. So I wasn't tech savvy at all back then. I'm still not, but at then I knew nothing, you know, but fortunately I was working with a guy that was, and he was, you know, putting me out there on YouTube. And so more eyes, I started getting international requests for seminars, you know, starting in, my first was 2007, going to Iceland, and then, you know, from there going to Europe, and it just took off from there. And then word of mouth, you know, I do a workshop in London. Some guy's visiting from Barcelona. He loves it. He's like, hey, I want you to do it at my place in Barcelona. And then now I'm in Barcelona, right? So it's like just saying yes to everything. And started, you know, 2007, basically traveling around the world. And, you know, and I've stayed with it. And it's not just kettlebell, but that's been such a dominant part of my professional life. And I was in a position to be an early adapter, and, you know, combined with my hatred of the corporate world and my love of travel, it just facilitated a, you know, very entrepreneurial lifestyle where I didn't want a 9 to 5. I wanted to go to someone's place and teach them for a couple of days, and then, you know, go somewhere else and do it to another group of people. And, you know, so it's still training, but it's training in a different format.
Mm-hmm.
You know, instead of going down the road,
Yeah.
flying across the world. And depending on your point of view, it's either a lot of work, you know, or it's, you know, so I was looking at different opportunities. And, you know, I'm still involved in that in some capacity, but it's metamorphosized in terms of the clientele I'm working with. And, you know, early on, now you and I first met in person, I guess we think it was probably 2011 or 2012 when I came out to Limerick, stayed with you, and, you know, so that was still in the first couple years. You know, 2008, I founded IKFF, so International Kettlebell Fitness Federation. And ever since then, been providing. And so now it's more than 60 countries around the world where I've physically gone and conducted seminars and certification courses and workshops. And, you know, obviously it's a passion for me, and it's lifestyle. And, you know, still relevant. I still use the kettlebell. I still love the kettlebell, but again, the styles change, the approaches change. Like I mentioned, I'm 50 now, and I still feel great, and I still can do everything. But certainly, my interests and my state of mind has changed a lot from when I was, you know, in my early 30s, first picking up the kettlebell. And now I'm not trying to pick up the heaviest kettlebell I can find every time, and this type of thing. So,
and like your time in martial arts obviously taught you an awful lot, because even listening to you speak there, you said there was obviously a very holistic approach between mind, body, and spirit. Like, what do you think the fitness industry could take most from martial arts?
yeah, you're right. And you know, I've always been a martial artist and still am. And, you know, I didn't mention, but I came back to the formal study of the martial arts again a little over 2 years ago. And now I'm involved in the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. and that's amazing. So I never left the martial arts. And what happened was I had in the beginning as a boy, I have this guru kind of, my Sifu was like a father figure, and then become a man and we part ways. And it's like a student that has lost his family. But what I really did was I created my own martial arts system. The kettlebell facilitated the ability for me to express martial art in a way that I could connect with people that may or may not be martial artists, but we're bringing the principles of movement.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't realize that at the time. It's only, I say that now looking back, when I finally came back to the martial arts formally through the jiu-jitsu, then I was able to understand that all those years with the kettlebell, I was always doing it differently. I wasn't doing a style. It was my style. It's the martial art of kettlebell. And so to answer your question, what can fitness individuals take that aren't necessarily involved in martial arts? Well,
But no,
what I
sorry,
say,
like even the industry in terms of coaches, like what?
yeah,
Yeah.
well, for me, I'm not a fan of industry. And I think that, we're in a world and, with this stay at home quarantine, what's going on, this thing, we're all becoming more aware rapidly that the world is changing in front of our eyes, and certain things we're never going back to. And certainly there's a lot of unclarity about what we're moving into and how that's ultimately going to look. But at least we all know that many things are changing and many things are different,
Mm-hmm.
And so when we talk about these types of things, language is very important. And what I want to see is that individuals become more conscious of word and meaning and the use of words, and not just talk bullshit, not just say things that have no meaning out of habit. And I'm not saying that everybody does, we all do to some degrees, but I'm saying society as a whole has not put proper value on words and the meaning and the power that they truly have. So I don't even like to talk about fitness industry, because I think it's an archaic concept and it's not how I operate. Because when I think of industry comes from the industrial age. And so it's about factory and worker and assembly and product. And fundamentally, it's a capitalistic idea where the end game is the profit measured in money. And I'm not saying that's bad. What I'm saying is that's not what I do, and that's not what you do, and that's not what our colleagues do. What we actually do is we provide a service. Okay, because if it's just about the industry, then you're showing up to collect the paycheck. It can be any old job. And so you're not loving it. You're doing it because you have to, not because you want to. And, that's not who you are. That's not who I am. Guys like us and people like our listeners, we do this quite because we don't want to do the other thing, because we need to feel good about it. We need to express, and we have this desire to help and to change the world and to make an impact. And it doesn't matter who you are or your resume or how much fame or anything. If you have one person and you impact that person and you're able to help them in their life, you've done something that is amazing. And there's no way to even know when you're doing it what impact that may have down the road, or who that person may impact based on the interaction with you. So it's an amazing thing, and this is how we change the world. So what I like to talk about is community, fitness community, because it's people, it's not products. And we can say, oh, but fitness industry, we have products, we have treadmills, we have kettlebell. Yes, that there are products that exist, but if you're a true educator, you don't need any of those things. Like if you take the kettlebell out of my hand, I can still teach you, because this is the machinery that is the foundation for all the products that we might be using. And if you think, oh, I don't have my barbell, so I can't train. Okay. You know, if you're on a desert island and you don't have any of your tools, no medicine ball, nothing that you like to use, can you still do something? And of course, if I ask you that, of course you can, and any good trainer, of course they can. You know, so products are involved in the bigger industry, but it's not about the products, it's about the service, it's the physical education. And that's a community. And I just think that, you know, I always bring that up when people ask me about fitness industry, because I don't want to go back to the old way and the old habit of convenience. I want to change the narrative.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, start talking about what it is and what it's becoming, rather than what it, you know, the status quo trying to keep us at the level that doesn't benefit humanity, because our nature is progress, our nature is biological, is to grow and to expand. You know, so the fitness community, what it offers the fitness community, and that's the trainers and the people and the users, you know, the students, the teachers, we're all involved together. And sometimes the coach becomes the pupil, depending on the scenario and the environment. Or if not, if they're unable to do that, then they've stopped growing. Right? Yeah. If we get to a point where I've learned everything, and, you know, I can't learn from this guy because it's going to, my, you know, my image, my reputation is too important, and I cannot be seen to be a white belt again because I'm a black belt here. Well, you're afraid. That's what it means. It means you are afraid of something.
Yeah.
You know, so the point anyway, not to go too roundabout, you know, to get to drill down, what does the martial art benefit the fitness world, is we have to look back at the human origins and where we come from. And essentially the physical body in this modern world, we are the same body as our ancestral tribal family that were living in caves and hanging in trees and hunting and gathering. In terms of physiological, we've changed very, very little, if at all. In more than 10,000 years, we haven't changed, but the environment has changed to where it's a completely different environment than what we once knew. And so we have lots of physical pains and ailments, in the sense that physiologically we have not adapted at the rate of the technology and the infrastructure that we function within. And the perfect example is the fact that we spent, especially city dwellers, we exist on two-dimensional, pristine, flat surface, which is not the way that the feet are designed. The feet are three-dimensional. And, you know, when we were walking on uneven terrain and climbing mountains, you know, our foot was doing all these, and now we're, you know, Nike has corrupted and programmed, you know, to where now we're inserting our feet into these cushiony high heel coffins that prevent the foot from functioning correctly as it's designed to function. And so, you know, anyway, the point being, we have to look at the origins and what we actually are, and fight and flight is the reference point. It's the reference point for physical training and martial arts and everything else. So all training is martial art training, because in the fundamental tribal primitive condition, we are primitive beings existing in a sophisticated world, right? But and anyone that doubts that, what's the catchy, trendy, you know, whether it's a coffee or whether it's a workout, everyone's trying to be primitive. Everyone's trying to be caveman. Why? Because there's this primitive knowledge within us that knows that, you know what, I don't want to walk with my core super tight. You know, I'm a fucking animal and I'm fucking, you know, I'm a beast. But there's another part of me that is a sophisticated, you know, polite, well-groomed Roman citizen, you know, but that other part of us, it was squashed and put in a box, but it was never went away. So we are animals. And if we understand that, then our primitive instinct, the fight and flight mechanism. And, you know, so there's danger. You have to respond to the danger. It's flight or it's fight. And hunting is the same. You're flighting to get to the fight so you can eat. And, you know, so how does that relate to fitness is when you drill it all down and distill it, because the different tools and the different techniques are just all roads leading to Rome. And, you know, the ultimate is the performance. So when we look, you know, and we're so physical beings, that's why in our cultures, we always admire great athletes and, you know, because we see the purity, we see the beauty and the grace in the execution of the movement. And if you resonate with strength sports, then you know, bench press is beautiful to you. And if you resonate with agility, then, you know, Michael Jordan flying through the air and dunking is beautiful to you. So there's different ways to express, but at some level, we all, when we see it, we know it, we acknowledge it, and we respect it. And, you know, so that's coming from that need that as a family, as a tribal family, there is a structure, and, you know, the men have things that they're doing and the women have things that they're doing, and the elders are doing things and the children are doing things. And, you know, we can be a peaceful tribe, but sometimes we have to fight because we're trying to be peaceful over here, and this tribe from over there wants to wage war. So they either slaughter us or we kill them. You know, I'm trying to be nice here, and these, you know, they keep getting in our faces, and I'd say, like, back off. I don't want to fight. So what do? We either got to move our shit to another location and hope they don't follow us, or we got to finish these dudes once and for all. What do you think happened to the Neanderthals? They're not around anymore because, you know, we're the survivors. So, you know, and that's what the martial arts is for fitness. It's fight and flight. And all the martial arts is, if it's a real martial art, is it's putting you in the fire where you're facing the force, and you learn to face the force. And when you can face the force, now you can join the force, and then you can redirect the force, and now you have the position of control.
Yeah, makes sense.
And jiu-jitsu does that, but all arts do that in some level. But jiu-jitsu is a great way to train it in the modern world because it's done in a way where it's controlled fury, and you can come back tomorrow and do it again because you're not getting kicked in the head, and you're not getting, you know, punched in the knee, or, you know, whatever. You know, you're not getting blunt trauma on a daily basis. And so it's something that is sustainable, and you can do it when you're old, and, you know, you can be a businessman and still do it and get your fight and flight on. You know, and anyway, we're all craving that. And so people that aren't doing martial arts, but they're fanatical about their training, they're still training that fight and flight. You're fighting with the kettlebell, you know, or your, you know, locomotion. So for me, if it doesn't address that, it's not really useful anymore. Because, you know, as a younger man, maybe bodybuilding aesthetics, because I want the girls to notice me, so I want my body to get beautiful. But, you know, we do get to a point where that's not the focus anymore. And we develop a confidence as a man where you know who you are, and you're not trying to prove anything to anybody, or you don't care. You're not trying to, you know, be noticed. You're just trying to do your thing. And, you know, so, but, you know, and I say that because, you know, as a younger man, I can understand, or a younger woman, or just a person that's, you know, in that state, I can understand that your priority in training might be aesthetics and it might not be function. It's easy to say, oh, you know, but if we're going to be honest, bodybuilding is important, because everyone that's doing fitness at some level, almost all of them, unless you're like a strong man and a power lifter and only care about the number, the large majority of people, whether it's CrossFit, kettlebell, you know, you name it, there's a part of them, they're doing it because they want to look better naked, you know? Yeah. And, you know, so we can pretend that we're all functional and, you know, this and that, but if you're not realizing that the bodybuilding is what the consumer cares about, then you're not honest and you're missing out. You know,
Absolutely.
if you try to force people to adhere to, oh, don't worry about the aesthetics, focus on the function. Well, you know, so I understand there is an aesthetic component of training, which may or may not have anything to do with the fight or flight. But once you get past that phase and you develop, you know, an acceptance of yourself to where it's not about, oh, I need to look beautiful to that person. It's more about, I just want to feel good and I want to be able to perform good. Now, when we look at training, if you're not developing your ability to locomote more effectively, and you're not or developing your ability to fight more effectively, then ultimately the training isn't as functional as it could be, because it doesn't transfer into the most essential necessities.
Yeah.
And even though we're not caveman anymore, we still have to fight and flight on the daily, and we're always fighting. And if it's not physical, it's in some other way. It's through, you know, the mind, you know, through words, and, you know, so, but the principle of understanding how to deal with conflict, when, you know, how do you deal with the conflict, and how do you deal with the conflict against a mass that is bigger and larger, a bigger, stronger, meaner individual. You can't meet it just head on like that.
Yeah. Like,
You
and
know,
there's a
you have
big,
to.
yeah, there's a big part of it where I just feel that, you know, you come from a martial arts background and therefore it's connected to something bigger than just the physical. You have this spiritual connection. And then
It
when an
is.
awful lot of people come through just your standard going to the gym, then it's not really connected to anything. And for those people, blowing off that steam, it's like a recalibration because they're dealing with all this stress in life. But you and I see it from a different perspective, and we always have these conversations because, you know, I use the word industry to try to lead you into that because I knew straight away that it would evoke that reaction with you. Like, we see a school system that's realistically in line with, you know what I mean, the industrial age, and we're preparing kids to dress the same, look the same, clock in and out, you know, prepare them to take work home with them to do homework and so forth. And you know what I mean? That's the way society is almost nailed. And the real, I suppose, disappointing thing when it comes to my perspective is, you know, you walk into a commercial gym and you see someone on a treadmill and they're so disconnected from the act of movement. They're not thinking about what they're doing. They're watching a match, or they're watching a soap, or they're watching something else. But yet, when we train together, and I'm sure when we train separately, there's a connection. There's a mind-body connection. There's a connection to breath. There's a connection to movement. There's a rooting to the floor. There's a connection to every rep and set. And I just feel that it's the biggest thing that people miss when they train, because they just don't build that innate connection. And I feel that you develop that in martial arts, and it gave you that pathway.
You're right. You're right. The mindfulness, and as you know, the analogy of a person on a treadmill, just, it's like destination unknown. You
Yep.
know, you're getting in the car, but there's no termination point in the navigator, so you're just driving around randomly, and you get to say, yeah, I went for a drive. Well, where did you go? Well, I don't know. And we see that in fitness. And so when the metric is body weight or body fat percentage or a certain appearance, okay, you can sort of validate the do nothing approach to just, I'm burning calories, I'm moving and I'm sweating, so therefore I'm working out, and I'm that's equating the benefit. But there's an emptiness, and it's more of an escape
Yeah.
in that sense.
100%. Yeah. It's not
So
attached.
yes,
It's
the
not
lack of
attached to anything.
mindfulness, and you're right.
Yeah. And it's
That
probably,
is that is the essential, and the martial arts certainly resonates. It ingrains this mindful. Yet I would say at the same time, any art form ingrains that,
mhm.
because a dancer or you know, any other artist movement, there must be a mind body connection. Um, you know, and so when we talk about it's the martial art. It's two things. It's martial means warfare, so that's the fight. But the art, that's the human expression. The art is all the unseen worlds, the imagined world. It's how you express yourself, how you see it, your creativity, the communication, the way you envision. You know, so someone can be a good fighter and not be a martial artist. And that's, we see that a lot in modern times with the MMA concept. It's not to be critical of MMA. If you have a good coach and a good school and training partners, which now we have much more than we did a decade ago, you know, certainly you're going to learn how to fight. But depending on the culture and the environment, you may not learn any way to apply the real principles into your daily life, which is the whole point of it. So, you know, if you're a skillful technician, but you don't have self-discipline and, you know, you're constantly ending up in jail, or you're constantly getting in domestic violence things, and it's like a sport. There's no, you know, and a martial artist is a well-disciplined individual. So, you know, you extend it beyond just the punch, kick, and grapple and fight on the ground, because your awareness is such that you're not getting yourself into situations that you're not going to be able to navigate well.
Yeah.
And is going to end up in with a negative outcome. You know, you have the awareness to see it forming before it forms, and therefore you're not there when it happens. You know, that's the broader, it's situational awareness. But the ultimate situational awareness extends to all facets of our life. And I'm not saying that I've mastered that, you know, but we can master in certain areas. Like, you can be a master of one thing and not be a master of other things.
Mm-hmm.
You know, yet in principle, when we understand it and we have the ability to recognize, we can also apply these lessons to the other areas of importance, you know. And, you know, we see that certain very effective athletes become very effective business people as well, because they apply the same level of focus towards that, you know. And it's not so common to meet individuals that are excel in all facets of life. You know, most great masters, they excel in one area. And if you excel in two, you're exceptional. And if you excel in all, you're, you know, like a Christ-like or Buddha-like individual, you know, which is what we are aspiring to be, right? We want to be complete in every way. And, you know, like, oh, I'm great at working out, but I'm trying to figure out how to pay the rent, or I got money, I got car, I got the house, you know, but my marriage is in shambles, right? So again, it's values. It's a value center. That's what the martial art is, and we fight for our values. You know, and the art is, now we share it to others. We inspire others. We teach it to others, and, you know, so that's how I determine. I'm not trying to be the best fighter that's ever lived. I just want to be the best fighter for these 6 minutes or these 10 minutes, you know, whatever. I want to beat the other guy right now, because you're trying to beat me and I'm trying to beat you. And we're brothers and we're helping each other. And, you know, sometimes you're going to submit me and sometimes I'm going to submit you. And it doesn't really change. It's not bad or worse. And I don't feel bad about it. You know, I don't like it while it's happening, but we get over it, right? We have to lose to win. You know, so to me, that's what the martial arts is we embrace discomfort, we accept disappointments, you know, and we understand that in the process, pressure makes diamonds.
Yeah. Yeah. And where do you think that this current situation, we'll call it, is, how is that going to drive consumer behavior in the fitness community going forward?
The most important thing that I think is we determine the outcome.
Mm-hmm.
We create the narrative, and every single person that is listening and watching this to become aware now that the individual, through our thoughts and through our behaviors and through our action, you know, through our words, is creating the story right now in the present.
Mm-hmm.
And It's about awareness, and it's about seizing the power, because there's power grabs is what is actually going on. And, you know, mainstream media is the greatest threat to the preservation of humanity, in my opinion, in my observation. Mainstream media is the weapon that enslaves humanity. You know, not solely. You know, there's an economic component, but what I'm saying is that we are stepping into an era where the machine is becoming more dominant by the day. And, you know, many folks have talked about this, and, you know, maybe I'm a fitness guy and people think I should stay in my lane, but my lane is very big, you know, and it covers a lot of different areas of interest. And I'm not a futurist, and I don't make my living giving my opinions about the way the world's going, but I'm a learned man and I have ideas about it. And there's thought leaders that have come before, you know, me, and, you know, that have contributed to this. So, you know, we can read up about it, but, you know, the idea of what's commonly called the singularity. Okay, Ray Kurzweil is the guy who's attributed with coining that term as a foremost futurist, and folks like him. The idea that, okay, with the rates of, we are in the information age, and we are caught between ages right now, where we are functioning in terms of our mindset and awareness. We understand that we are entered and are in the midst of an information age, but when we look at our infrastructure that we operate with and that we utilize, it's still in the industrial age.
Mm-hmm.
So our infrastructures and our cities and our communities have not transitioned purely into the information age. It's like we're using old technology for new ideas. And this is the challenge that we have. So what I think coming on the other side, so to speak, of where we are now, in other words, at some point in the future, you know, we imagine that we are not quarantined, and there's not this virus, and this virus doesn't come back every, you know, and all the fear and uncertainty surrounded the discussions. That's why I say the mainstream media, because if our information, our ideas about it is what the mainstream media is playing, the truth is that all the mainstream media is playing the same tune. And, you know, I can't say media because what we're doing here is media, but this is independent media. And the independent media is now where we can get alternative realities and necessary information that we're not going to get if we're limited to whatever, CBS, NBC, BBC, you know, all these letters. And, you know, so that's an important point, is we get to decide. And in that process, it may be necessary for people to completely turn off their televisions and their radios and their magazine and newspaper. And now we create the media, and it's based on trust. It's an economy of trust. We have trusted the wrong individuals, and we were naive to put our trust where it's not deserving. And, you know, that's in the paper money, that's in the government, that's in the state. And in many cases, the churches and the school, you know, it's the control of the narrative we've put in the hands of others, and accepted at face value that they're going to do the right thing with it. And they haven't, and they continue not to. And we keep allowing them another chance, and being tricked and thinking, oh, the next guy, he's going to be different. Oh, I made a mistake last time, but this time I'm voting for the other guy. And come on, we can't just keep being so stupid and so naive. If, you know, like if you take a child that has no education and you put fire and he touches it, he will pull his hand away. and he might do it a second time, and he might do it 5 or 6 times, but he's not going to do it 1,000 times over. At some point, probably most of us after the first time, some of us it takes a little longer because sometimes you're slow to learn, but you're also slow to lose. So it's okay to be slow to learn as long as you learn. The problem is you keep burning yourself over and over, and you're not making the connection that if I touch the fire, I get burned, and you think the next fire is going to give you a different result. You know, so what's the solution? The solution is people have to recognize who we really are and what we really are, and not be limited by the material and the world of appearances, because there's an entire invisible world that's operating all around us. You know, you want to talk about spirit, we can use that term to describe this idea. There's an invisible. We're not just beast. We're a combination of animal, which is the body, and some celestial, eternal, unlimited aspect, which is nameless. And people think that they're going to put a name on it, and now you get some ownership over it and you get to tell others about it. That's not the reality that I live in, because the name is not, you know, all that something is. And there's things that are greater than ourselves. So it's arrogant to think that we can define something greater than ourselves. You know, if I start saying, oh, that magical thing, that's God. Okay, well, what's that? You can't define the invisible with visible. You know, so the point is the power of the mind. We get to actually create the realities that we experience. And collective conscious, the media is a tool that shapes collective conscious, because if we're all watching the same programming, that's what it is.
Yep.
It's the tell, lie, vision, programming. So who's programmed, and what's the program?
And
if it's all,
and in America, it's quite unique, Steve, isn't it? Because essentially, now correct me if I'm wrong here, but just from the outset looking in, CNN seemed to be very much aligned with the Democrats, and Fox seems to be very much aligned with the Republicans. Would that be a fair statement?
That's the general consensus. You know, the joke and the nickname about CNN is it's always referred to as the Clinton news network.
Okay.
You know, Fox is generally associated as quote unquote right wing. It's owned by the Rupert Murdoch company. I don't buy into that narrative at all, because there's no such thing. It's a facade. The two faces are, they all go to the same dinner parties. They're friends.
Yeah.
And even if they're not friends like you and I are friends, they're enemies that cooperate, even if they hate each other.
There's a bigger game.
Because there's vested interest.
Yeah.
And it is divide and conquer. And so I don't buy that facade. And that's the bigger problem, is the idea of this dualistic system, and thinking that it's what's called the illusion of choice. So in America, the reality of the politics is there is no left. There's only a far right and a center right. So what we call the left is actually center right. And what we call the right is the far right, which is often associated with evangelical, you know, hardcore, quote unquote Christian, but not the Christian that is about love and forgiveness, but is about conquering and imposing, you know, just leveraging the brand name type of thing, you know. But this, it came in during the Reagan era, where you had, you know, the way that the voting works is, you know, you canvass and you have, so if it's this small town in Georgia and this influential preacher, if you got the preacher on your team, now you got those 10,000, you know, parishioners also voting for the same. And that's how it works. You know, we have 350 million people here, and, you know, so I don't believe any of that. I believe that it's all government, and the news media are simply, there's six media companies in the world that own all the mainstream media. Only 6. Viacom, Disney owns ESPN, owns ABC, this company buys Comcast or whatever. So there's only like 6 of the Fox or whatever what's the Rupert Murdoch parent company, World News Media or whatever.
Yeah,
But, that's one of them. You got the Disney is one of them. There's only 6 of them, and they own everything. So everything we're consuming, every, newspaper, TV, and yes, there is independent, but I'm talking about the mainstream narratives that, have the biggest audience, and there's a certain generation of us, you and I know, but the generation that's older than us, those folks traditionally are using traditional channels because they grew up in a world where you could still trust your government was doing the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
World War II was something that most people believed in. It's not the era of the Vietnam and the era of, Iraq, where most intelligent people understand that these are aggressive acts that are not warranted and we don't support it. And, so the world has changed a lot, and there's an older generation that still has a lot of trust in the establishment. And then there's a lot in our generation that do too, but then there's the young generation that have no trust at all in it. And, so as far as practical things, what are we stepping into? Well, I think it can go a lot of different ways. I think it can go in ways that are very positive, and I think it can also go in ways that are very negative. And I think what determines that is the collective consciousness and the individuals that have awareness and self-value and self-concept and self-discipline enough to create the narrative of the world that we want. And what I believe the answer is simply, I want for others what I want for myself. And that's the world that I want to step into. It's not about I want it, and for me to get it, somebody else has to not have it. It's about, it's a world where it's a creative process that we are tapped into, that we've always been tapped into, but we've cut ourselves off from it because we haven't been aware. And we've believed these programs which tell us that it's a dog eat dog, survival of the fittest, and in order for me to eat, somebody else has to go hungry. And it's that competitive model. That's a faulty narrative. And it might have been good, in certain times in history, and certainly in the tribal, when you have egocentric, where it's like me, and then you have ethnocentric, where it's about, Irish, Ireland for Irish, or it's American, America for Americans. Okay, that's nice if you're American, but that's not the world we live in. We don't need nationalistic ideas because it's not a nationalistic environment. It's a global, we're all connected. You're in Ireland, I'm in San Diego. So how does it make a difference if you Irish and, I care about Irish? Well, okay, yeah, of course, you're Irish, but does that mean you should not care about the Scottish or the Moroccans or the, Saudi Arabians? Like, we're all connected. And that's what we need to get out of this, is the reality that we're all interconnected and we all need each other on some level, whether it's seen or unseen. And, maybe I don't need you, Adrian, to help me right now in this particular need that I have. However, we all need to work together in the sense of what is the world that we are creating. And importantly, what are we willing to give up to get what we want, what we truly want? And so, in summary, what I see coming out is a change of values, is a reprioritization of what actually is important and what actually has value. And when that coalesces and integrates, we will have a world where the currency of exchange is value versus perceived value. Mm-hmm. And so we're stepping out of this fake mirage of oh, here's a $100 note. What does that represent? It represents $100. You can buy $100 worth of goods. It's the goods that have the value. The note has zero value, and the only thing that's keeping it afloat is the fact that I believe it and you believe it, and we have an agreement that that paper is made worth something. But the reality is the corruption and the greed and the ego, that the nature of the ego is it feeds itself and it eats itself and it needs to consume.
Mm-hmm.
The ego cannot stand quiet. The ego cannot stand lack of attention. And the ego is very insecure. So, you know, those that have had power have been corrupted by it.
Yeah.
And to the point where it's just about more power. And, you know, people have to begin to govern oneself. We have to govern ourselves and conduct ourselves in the way that we want our communities to be. And there's a code. There is a code, and there's a code of honor. And, you know, guys like us, we understand this code and we operate within this code when we are interacting. But a lot of times when we're out and about in the world, it becomes very difficult because that code is not practiced by the general population. It's not, it's more, you know, like Indian traffic, where it's everybody for themselves and you're just kind of fighting for the, and, you know, I'm not saying it's one or the other. Chaos, and, you know, it's yin and yang, it's life and death. It's always moving sort of interconnectedly, you know. So for every birth there's a death, and for every inhale there's an exhale. So it's not like one or the other, but it's about what are we focusing on, and we want to focus on moving forward. We don't want to focus on being distracted by all these unimportant things that are not moving us forward.
Yeah,
And you
and
know,
like to me, the narrative of cooperation is going to serve humanity, and especially our kids and their kids. But the concerning thing is, how much more do we have to absorb as in our current state of humanity before we actually see that? At what point is, you know, at what point is the penny going to drop, and are people actually going to finally just live with their eyes wide open? Because it's easy to live with your eyes wide shut. It's easy not to see this. You know, it's I again, I don't watch mainstream media for every reason that you just outlined there, but I just happened to be in the sitting room, and one of the American channels was on, and they were talking about, just for the 30 seconds I watched it, and there was, I don't know who the real political leaders are in America, or the supposed political leaders, but it had the lineup, and it was these two leaders and entertainment from Alicia Keys. And I was thinking to
yeah.
myself, oh my God.
Well, the interesting thing about America as a nation is that it's not a nation, it's a corporation. And, you know, USA is Rome. Now, this is a whole nother topic, and, you know, we're not going to go super deep down this because all these things can be traced and there's historical, and you can follow the timeline for people that are interested. But in very short summation, when we talk about history and the, you know, fall of Rome is not a complete, it's the decline and fall, because what's known as the fall of Rome occurred over about 1,000-year period. So it was a slow and gradual decline until, you know, now Rome is no longer type of thing. But actually that's not the reality. Rome has always been present, and Rome is still present. And in short, the family lines and the bloodlines, if you will, are the same and have always been the same
Yeah.
since then. And so, and it's generational and it's passed along. And that's why in Europe, the intermarriages where this king marries this queen, and that's always, every single royal family is related either by blood and marriage. And that's all over the world. And that's why the queen's face is on the Australian dollar and the Canadian dollar and the New Zealand dollar. And, you know, and all these other places, because the sun never set on the British Empire. And the reason why London is the financial capital of the world is because when the Romans went up to the British Isles, Londinium was the capital of the British leg of the Roman Empire. So all that happened is when Rome proper fell, UK became the dominant. In other words, Rome shifted to the UK, and that's why the British Empire became dominant. And then much later, after World War II, it shifted to US. That's why the US dollar has been the world reserve currency. So Washington, D.C. is just an extension of Rome, an extension of the British Empire. It's all connected. And, so anyway,
And
when people want to analyze politics and
is the Vatican, is the Vatican connected in some way?
The Vatican is connected, of course, and there is a triad, which is an unholy triad. If you connect the Vatican with the City of London, and I say the City of London, not London, because we know that within London there's an independent state, nation state called the City of London, the population 130 or whatever it is, and in those few square blocks, every major bank in the world has their headquarters in those offices. So that is the financial capital. That is the financial chakra, if you will. Vatican is the quote unquote spiritual chakra. Nation state also. And the nature of a nation state is it's autonomous. There's no authority.
Yeah.
So it can make its own laws and it doesn't have to answer to anybody. And the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. is the military branch of this unholy triad. So if you look at the Vatican, you look at the City of London, and you look at the Pentagon in Washington, D.C., basically these are the three methods in which control is exerted. Because in the early days, you had, in other words, Washington, D.C. is the military arm, so that if we want something done and these people don't want to go along, we call in the Pentagon and they take care of it. They're the big bully that, we're going to send our soldiers to enforce our will upon you, unwilling, unparticipating. We're going to bomb you and shoot you and kill you and torture your family until you acquiesce. And that's how it is. And from the beginning of time, because in the tribes, and I know a lot of people can't handle that, but we got to see things for what they are. In the beginning of times, like if we have our tribe and our family, well, at some point you got to make bands, because our tribe, maybe there's 10 of us, and we have to extend with other tribes that we can get along with. And now we make bands, and those went up to about 150 people. Okay. And because if there's another tribe over on the other side of the hill, and they keep coming over and they keep stealing our stuff and taking our women and killing our sons and the fathers, well, we have to protect this. And, we're not strong enough to do it. So we form cooperatives. And now, and maybe we're going to kind of move, and we're a nomadic tribe. So we're always on the go like a deer, and you're never in one place for too long, and you're looking for food, and you're just watching out for enemies. And, so you form cooperatives so everybody is safe. It doesn't take, most of the tribes people, the humans, were not violent at all. We were peaceful, and we're just like other animals. We were just looking to exist peaceably, and, we only fight when we have to, and we only hunt if there's a shortage of food. I mean, if there's like fruits and figs and stuff around, I'm just going to eat what's there. I'm not going to chase, the rabbit for the next 3 hours. That's hard work. So it was the people in the north coming out of the ice ages, living in caves. There was no vegetation, so they had to hunt. Yeah. Anyway, but when we look at the origins and like, how do you, if you want to impose your will, if let's say you're a tribes person, let's just say you're like a primitive man for a second, and understand how this process works. And it's like you decide that tribe over there, we're going to go and we're going to steal their stuff. So you go and you steal and you take it, but maybe they're going to fight you. So now what? Now you have to kill them. You have to impose your will. And so if you're more violent, you're going to be, you know, more determined, and you become the tribe. Now you're the dominant tribe. You defeated that tribe. You took their stuff and you took their women, and now you're breeding, and now you have a bigger tribe, and you become, you know. But so the point being, to talk about this, you know, politics and the Vatican and London and you know, DC, basically the way, if you're going to control someone else, you use force. That's the first way. It's like, you know, or forget about war. Just think about like a Catholic school, right? The kids being bad, the nuns like, I'm going to smack your hand with a ruler if you don't obey, you know, or I'm going to punish you. I'm going to paddle you if you don't obey. Okay, well then I obey because I don't want to be paddled, right? So, and parents use that with children. Do what I tell you or I'm going to spank you. Okay, so intimidation and force is the fastest way to get somebody to do something that they don't want to do and you want them to do. Normal. And it happens on the microscopic, and it happens also on the geopolitical, on the macroscopic. Okay, but in some cases, it doesn't work. Because let's say a father has a boy and he beats the kid when the kid's a boy, when he doesn't do what he's told, and then the boy becomes a man, and now he can't beat the father. Now that teenage boy is stronger and he beats the father. Well, guess what? That kid, you know, your martial, your military intimidation doesn't work on me because I ain't afraid of you. So you come and you try to kill us, we're going to fucking kill you. We're going to fight back. Right? So now, through military means, now there's certain individuals, you cannot control them through military means because they don't have fear of you. And they're going to fight to the death. So what's the other strategy? Now I'm trying to control you. I can't defeat you that way. So how do I defeat you? Well, I control the resources. So now, economic embargo. Okay, you do what I tell you, and if you don't, we're not going to send wheat to you. We're going to use our military to block your borders so that no food can come in. So the people are going to get starved out until you acquiesce. Okay, our people are dying. Okay, we'll come to the, you know, we'll give you what you want. Okay, but some of us, we're going to take to the hills. We're going to fight, and if there's no food, we're going to take to the hills and we're going to find food, because guys like us, we are ingenuitive and we scrap and we find a way to make it happen. So, you know what? You cut me off on the money. I don't need your money. I can live off the land, right? So you have these two weapons, and a lot of people, the first weapon is enough to get them, to enslave them and control them. Other people, they won't, but you can get them with the economic control. And then you got that very rare guy who you can't control him at all. Well, if you don't do what I tell you, when you die, you're going to hell. Okay, you're going to hell when you die if you don't do what I tell you. Well, now I'm afraid, okay, because the thought of the afterlife, the unknown, and if I don't follow along with what I'm being told, I'm going to burn in hell forever. That's too much, man. I can't. I better just go along with the program, you know, and that's how it happened. And that's how it stays with the, you know, you control through the military, you control through the money, and you control through the institutionalized religion. And I'm not talking bad about religion, because many of us are religion and we all have a right to express that. But the purity of that is based on being a better person. And, you know, if love and forgiveness is not a part of that, then it's not a real, it's just something else, you know. So I'm talking about the institution You know, so that's how the Vatican comes in. The Vatican is involved in the control of the spiritual, psychological, and emotional space of billions of people around the world. Not to mention, you know, other stuff about, you know, gold and archives and information and suppression of, you know, documents and things. That is also a part of that. And I'm not even talking about the pedophilia that is a big part of it, you know. So just in terms of what is the the basic stuff, you know. So, you know, these institutions, but if you look on the map and you draw a point from the Vatican to the city of London to Washington, D.C. and back, forms a nice little triangle there. And that's the North Atlantic, which is the NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. So it's this agreement between certain powers that, like, hey, we're going to watch each other's back. And everyone sold a bill of goods because, you know, oh, the Nazis and the Nazis are the bad guys. And, you know, we want to make sure that doesn't happen again. So in the future, if something like this comes up, you know, England and Ireland, all of us, you know, and we're going to kind of team up and help each other. And really what it is it's just an alliance that controls, you know, the population using the excuse of fear. And this method is just repeated because, you know, it was the Nazis then, and then it was the Russians. And, you know, I think in recent years, it's been the Muslims, you know, and now it's the Chinese, and I think the Russians again. So it's just doing this jump around, and here's the enemy, and, you know, divide and conquer, divide and conquer. And they talked about it thousands of years ago, and it's still going on. And, you know, Nero, right? It's like bread and circus. You give them enough grain. That was how Rome operated. Is you produce enough grain that everybody gets to eat, everyone gets bread, and you give them entertainment. You got the Colosseum, you give them a circus so they can forget about the misery of the mundane of their difficult life working as slaves.
Yeah.
You know, and it's the illusion of choice. And, you know, and then, you know, after the French Revolution, people became keen and realized these fucking, you know, scumbags, we're going to kill these, you know, and they stormed the castle and they executed the king. And, you know, so then the monarchies were like, whoa, the natives are, you know, they're not going to take the same shit. So we better be more crafty now. So what do? Now we put this wall in front of us. Now we got the parliaments. And so we get mad at the prime minister or this party or that party, and we think, oh, that because of this guy. But no, those ones are puppets. Those ones are the face of their representatives of the ones that we never see and we don't even know about, that have been operating, as you said, eyes wide shut. They're operating in the shadows. And, you know, it's pretty complex, and a lot of people don't believe it. And people say, oh, conspiracy, whatever. Well, that's intellectual laziness and it's cowardice, because I'm not saying, oh, every conspiracy is true. I'm saying that words have meaning. And to conspire is when two or more come together to make a plan. That's what to conspire means. So a conspiracy is just a plan that was enacted in secrecy, meaning people don't know about it. That's all that a conspiracy is. So if you're going to say that a conspiracy doesn't exist, then you're a coward, because it's more comfortable to believe that things are only as they appear, and any alternative narrative I'm going to dismiss because the quote unquote evidence doesn't support it. But the evidence is being provided through a channel that is deceiving, you know. And the whole term of conspiracy is just to shut up people like me that want to consider that there's more than meets the eye.
Yeah.
You know, and it's something that the CIA developed the term, you know, after the JFK assassination, because too many people were like, this doesn't add up, it doesn't make sense, and it had a massive emotional. And so they came up with the term conspiracy theory and flooded the media with this as a way to indoctrinate that if you question the story, you're a fucking weirdo and you're an idiot and you're a loner loser. And you know what? We're going to set up a website to debunk all these alternative, to debunk it. Oh, okay, end of story. I guess I won't ever think about that again because Snopes says it's fake. Fuck Snopes.
Yeah.
Snopes is part of the problem. Snopes is the mainstream media's fucking conspiracy killer.
Yeah.
You know, and meanwhile, all this bullshit continues along because we're like, oh, okay, I guess that, you know, and we have events that happen that resonate. You know, 9/11 was JFK assassination, and then 9/11 and more recent was the thing where people are like, wait a second, what's really going on? And then now it's all the time because it's like now they come out of the shadows and they don't even try to hide. And we're going to see that more and more. And, you know, the Jeffrey Epstein thing recently,
Mm-hmm.
like, you don't have to be a conspiracy theorist even to think that he didn't kill himself,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And, you know, so prior to JFK, it was called the Assassination Theory. And, you know, even going back predating World War I with the assassination of the Archduke Ferdinand of Austrian-Hungary Empire, right? That's the quote unquote powder keg moment when he was assassinated in Sarajevo, and that's what got the, you know, the Serbians and everybody, and that grew into the war to end all wars that they called it, the first one, and the second one is just a continuation, and they've been planning for the third one, which we've already entered, which is mostly at this point a war on proxy, and it's only being enacted on ground in Syria and places like that. But hey, do we really care? Because, you know, well, they're Syrian, right? We're over here. There's no bombs being dropped in Dublin, or there's no bombs being dropped in, you know, New York. So out of sight, out of mind. Oh, you see the pictures, you might feel bad. Oh, poor kids, you know, but to those people, right, it's real. And, you know, so how far we've come, and yet how much we're in the same spot that we've stayed in because of the divide and conquer and keep falling for the same tricks. You know, what's it going to take to break the cycle? It's going to take the recognition that everything that we have been taught and everything that we have believed and everything that we have seen and been told, I'm not saying it's all a lie. I'm saying consider the possibilities that it is all a lie. Consider the possibility. Just be open to the possibility and humble enough to accept that everything I think I know, I'm wrong about. And if you can get to that point in your cognition, then you can make the leap to start considering alternative narratives. And from there, you can start to understand more of, you know, what we're talking about here. And, you know, I'm not saying I know everything or I know anything. I'm saying that all I know is that I don't know anything. So it would be naive for me to actually accept at face value anything. And just because a narrative is repeated over and over and over, it's does that make it fact? It makes it true only in perception.
Yeah.
Because we believe that it's true because we've seen it and heard it so many times, and that's marketing.
Yep, at the highest level. Even when we started talking first, people probably straight away their consciousness moved towards Trump. Trump is only a pawn. He's only a part. You know what I mean? He's only
He's a unique figure in history. He is, and he's a unique figure, and he's very hard to crack. And I can see it from a lot of different ways, and I don't say that I know. I believe more and more as I'm looking, I believe he is the black sheep, counterinsurgency. He is the eating his own from within. And I think when we look back in history 100 years or several hundred years, he will be a figure that was historic in the sense of like a Cyrus or the sense of an Alexander or a Caesar, not because I'm a Trump fan. And don't get me wrong, I'm not a Trump guy, and I don't even play the game. I don't participate in the process at all. Because if you're going to show me two pieces of shit and say I have to eat one of them because one tastes worse than the other, I'm going to be like, I'm not going to eat it all. Yeah. I'd rather go hungry. You know, that's me, because I don't see the game as it's something else, you know. And so, you know, and again, the conditioning, the cultural conditioning to say, oh, well, if you don't vote, then you have no right to comment. That's bullshit, because to do something is an action, and to not do something is also an action. It's a choice. Yeah. You know, so no movement is a movement. Yeah. You know, and as long as you have and the fact that you are a citizen, the fact that you are a human gives you the human right, certain human rights. Yep. And, you know, the Enlightenment period that started in France and England and Europe, you know, in the 18th century, that 19th century, that was the time in history where the first idea that, you know what, we can be more than just serfs. We can be more than just peasants. We can appreciate art, and we can develop philosophy, and we can consider the, you know, development of societies and liberties, and, you know, being able to own property. And that did not exist before that. And, you know, these aristocrats in the, you know, hills of, you know, wine country in France were, you know, drinking wine and doing whatever, thinking, oh, what a beautiful day in the castle, and wouldn't it be nice, you know. And you had these, you know, the Voltaire and all these people and all that movement. You had, you know, you had Kant, and you had Freud, and you had, you know, Voltaire and Rousseau, and you had all these people that we now say were, you know, pioneers of Western development of thought. And, you know, well, they let the cat out of the bag, and they gave us that idea, and now that idea has stayed, you know. And so now you're going to try to tell us that was all bullshit and just talk, and we're just going to still be slaves. And I'm like, no, I kind of like that idea that we can become kings too. Yeah. Like, yeah, I was born a peasant, but I'm a king, you know, and you're a king, and I respect you, and we're going to be friends, but I don't have nobody authority over me. There's only one authority, and that's the Almighty. Okay. And, you know, I don't recognize the authority of the president. I don't recognize the authority of the figure. I will give you your respect for your job. So if you're a police officer and I'm speeding and you pull me over, I will recognize your authority in that position, because I signed up for that. And I'm not going to make a fuss and try to, like, no, and fight. But whatever authority someone has is only authority in a particular area. Mm-hmm. But if you're going to try to overstep that and tell me that you get to decide this and that for me, no fucking way. You know. And, you know, and the same with government, but that's what we do, and that's what we agreed to, because words have power and it has meaning. And if you accept those, then you accept what comes with it. And to govern means to control. Hmm. And ment means mind. So government is mind control. That's what the word means. And when you understand that, then you understand that that's what is going on and has been going on. Okay, because if I am participating and I accept that there's a government, then that means I'm saying that there's an authority that gets to decide for me how I live, how I function, how I express, and most facets of my life. And it's just a very small handful of individuals that is making that determination for the masses of all of us. And I'm not saying it's all bad, and I'm not saying it's unnecessary. I'm saying it has been necessary at times in history, but I'm saying it's not going to be necessary moving forward. Yeah. because now we're at the point of self-governance. And when you have, and so it goes back to the martial arts, you know, the safest place you can be is in a group of well-trained martial artists, because the egos are under control. You're not going to have guys needing to prove anything because they already know that they're capable. And also we understand that your power is best when it's not revealed. And the act of having to reveal your power is a weakness in and of itself, because now you see what I got, and now there's an opening. But the meek shall inherit the earth. So the one who looks weak and unassuming may be the one that is the most dangerous man in the room. You know, so that's the greater point of the martial art, is we cultivate the self-discipline such that the way that we can function in our own home is the way we function within society. And in a global society, it's the way that we function in all of our interactions. And when we have individuals that are developed to that level, we don't need other people telling us how to behave, because we have code and we have honor. So you know what? I don't try to take your wife from you, and you don't try to take my wife from me. And, you know, whatever the rules of society, I'm your friend and I'm welcome to your home, but I agree that I'm going to knock on the door and give you a chance to invite me in. I'm not just going to walk in, you know, and it's so basic, you know, and it's like, I don't take from your pile. And if I need, I ask you, do you have any extra? Can you spare? If you can help me out with this, and, you know, I can't pay you back, but I can clean your yard for you, you know, and we go back to that kind of society. I'm not saying bartering, but the economic system that we function in is broken.
Yeah.
And we're living off the fumes. And, you know, so I don't have the answer as far as what's next. I don't quite have the vision of what that's going to look like. I have an idea, but, you know, I just know that what is obvious to see, and we have a fiat currency, a paper money that isn't worth anything. And whether you're talking about the US dollar, the euro, the pound, it's the same issue. And the yen, and, you know, there's only a couple actually paper monies in the world that actually are worth, like the Kuwaiti dollar, to my knowledge, is the most valuable in terms of buying power. The Kuwaiti dollar is backed by gold. But, and there's a few others. Most of the ones are in the, you know, the oil producing states, but for the most part, the major world currencies, there's no backing. They're just printed out of thin air, and they're just kept in circulation through this compliance. And the way that it works is through the oil and through the war. And the wars are all bankers' wars. And what we're sold, and the media is utilized as the tool to condition the thinking, to break down the resistance, so that we stop resisting and then we participate. And that's how the machine goes along. And you know, we're going along basically numb and unaware of how the process is actually working. And if people understood it, they wouldn't be participating, because most people are not evil. And, you know, there's so many people that have given up on humanity and think, oh, people are inherently bad. And it's because of the corruption that exists. And what the corruption does to our basic humanity, it puts us in a situation where we're forced to accept and participate in behaviors that we inherently know are wrong. And we don't know how to escape it, because we're just trying to survive. And this is the main challenge. And it's all industries have been corrupted. The food, the medicine, the government is, you know, by its nature corrupted. You know, but even in the early days, the early governments were not corrupt. They were just citizens that were responsible for the administration of resources. And that was what it was supposed to be. And it's grown into this behemoth machine that feeds upon power and feeds on itself, and just is all, that's not what it was, but it's over time, the individual has continued to give up portions of himself and herself based on this illusion of compliance to the game. And so I think one of the really best things is the bad things. What we're coming out of this, the bad that we experience becomes the good, because the economy is collapsing. It's already collapsed, and some of us know it, and others, we haven't realized it yet because we're still moving, or we have a little bit in storage, or maybe some have a lot in storage, but we still have enough to get by. So we read about and we hear about it, but we're not directly experiencing it. We can still go to the market and get food. Our kids are eating. We have a house. So, we're learning to live with less. But on the other hand, there's a growing number of people that are further and further removed, to the point now this is the month where I can no longer pay my mortgage. And this is the week where now I can't put gas in my car. And this is the day where I can't even afford to go buy. And now we're eating bread because we can't afford steak. And, and now a month later, now I'm looking for food, and now I'm going into the trash cans, and now I'm begging, because that's how it is. Because you're going to do whatever you need to do to survive. We are survivors. And when we see the homeless people sleeping on the street and we don't want to look because it's too painful or it's too inconvenient, I understand that, and I feel the same. But until we recognize that that's me, that guy, that is me sleeping on the street. And that's the level of recognition that we have to grow to understand that we are not bodies with a spirit. We are a spirit in body, a spirit with a body, and the bodies are like all different cells in the same body. And it's only the world of appearances and perception that gives us differentiation to where I see different, to where I look at you and you're different because you have a different accent and you have a different tone to your skin, and you live in a different place, or you work in a different field, or your hair and your eyes are different color. That's not true difference. That's individuality expressing itself in unlimited ways. But in the essential, we're all more the same than different. And yet our education is focusing on the different, focus on what's different, see opposition, see difference. And as long as we have that idea in our mental construct of differentiation and duality, we're not whole, because we're at war with ourselves. If I think the Muslim hates me for my freedom and I see him as the enemy, then I'm participating in the fucking war and the facade, because that guy over there, he's that way because that's where he was born. He practices that culture because when he was born, his parents practiced the culture, and where they were living, that was the dominant culture. But that same person, if you put him and he's born over here, he has a God by a different name, and he has different practices. But that's not a different, that's just nature. And we get fixated on these, oh, he speaks a different language, or that's, and I say that with authority because I've traveled around the world multiple times. I've been to 70 countries for past 15 years, most of them multiple occasions. And I'm not saying I know all there is, but I'm saying I tested that. I had that theory before I was traveling, and then I tested it, and now it's not a theory. Now it's proof, and I know it because it doesn't matter where I go, and for me, the kettlebell is the great unifier, because we're doing this and nothing else matters. We're just all here for the same reason. And if you're Chinese or Kuwaiti or, or Irish or whatever, we're all just trying to get better. We're all just trying to better ourselves, and then use that so that we can help others And with that, we can benefit them so that we can also take care of our family. And that's what you want. And that's what I want. Everybody wants that. There's nothing different, you know? And when we understand now it's about unity, it's one. It's not right, wrong, good, bad, you know, but there's manipulations that have occurred throughout history that have kept humanity limited. And, you know, Darwinism is a big example. I'm not an expert in Darwin himself, and I haven't looked at all his teachings, and I believe probably there's been things done with his work that is totally not necessarily what he was trying to do, but nevertheless, it was a very useful tool for social conditioning of what we call Darwinism and evolution theory as it's taught, because it instills this idea that the world is fundamentally a place of scarcity, which is untrue. It implies and it teaches us that there's a shortage of resources, and therefore, since there's scarcity, in order to survive, we have to fight over limited resources. And that's what it teaches, and that's what we're taught, and that's how our structures are kind of set up in a competitive model. So when you're in grade school, starting at 5 years old, you're already starting to be programmed with this competition type of mindset, you know, that you need to get a better grade than the other guy. There's nothing about self-development in that. It's like everyone's playing the same game, and so you're just trying to, it's crabs in a barrel, you know. It's just, I don't need to outrun the bear, I just need to outrun you type of thing, you know. And as long as I can, if I have to step over the other guy and, you know, he gets eaten by the sharks, and well, then that's what I do, because that's the opportunity I'm given. But you're not seeing the opportunity, because the reality is there's no limit, there's no scarcity, there's abundance. And it's just creative. There's abundance always, and it's always, there's always creation. And only when we cut ourselves off from that contact through our way of thinking and doing does it become scarcity. It's a mental construct, and all the things associated with that come out of the same. Poverty is the same mental construct. Sickness, disease is the same construct. Suffering is the same construct, because it's the thought process that something is bad and something is wrong and something is short and something is scary. And so, oh my God, I'm afraid of this illness. Well, now you have the illness because your whole mental energy is focused on it. And the subconscious mind doesn't know the difference between positive and negative. So it's just the subject that you keep playing, you know. And so in the world of oneness, in the world of unity, disease does not exist, poverty does not exist, suffering does not exist. And, you know, someone that, if you just take that kind of snippet and make a, you know, 10-second clip, someone's saying, oh, well, he's in this sort of euphoric fake resistance, is just fly by night, it doesn't exist. Well, but that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying on a practical level, we create the reality that we experience. And so if you get to a point in your life where you're no longer satisfied by repeating the same, now you get to change the story, and you condition your mind to look in a different direction. And that's about the creative. So we learn to create, and we're adapting. Like, okay, trainers, the gyms are closed, so you have to find another way to provide your service to the world. And if it's Zoom live or whatever it is, then we just do it. We figure it out. And, you know, a couple years down the road, it's going to be fully adapted, and it's going to seem like it's always been that way. Even though, you know, right now we're thinking, is it ever going to go back to that? Forget about if it's ever going to go back to that. Think about what is it going towards, and actually the future doesn't exist yet. The present exists. So in the present, we shape the future. You know, and that's what's so exciting is we get to choose.
There's so much in what you said there, Steve. And I have literally, I must have 10 questions I want to go back on, but we're rolling up on 2 hours now, okay? So
All right.
we're going to do a part 2 of this, okay? In the meantime, what I would suggest for the listeners is, you know, Steve has created so much awareness. Just look at the work of Dr. Bruce Lipton, Dr. Joe Dispenza, just to tie into what Steve has said. You know, read books like The Invisible Rainbow, so forth, open up our minds just to other possibilities. And I just want to thank Steve so much for he has a unique way with words. He's always a truth seeker. I didn't open up with this, but I remember, Steve, we were coming down from Galway at that time from doing a seminar, and you just started speaking, and it was just phenomenal in terms of the level of intellect, the level of just, you know, your knowledge of history and your awareness of what's going around us is just second to none, Stephen. I just want to thank you so much, and we will do a part 2 on this, definitely.
Part 2, part 10, whatever. I'm here, brother, and you just let me know.
100%.
It's always a pleasure to talk with you.
Absolutely, Steve. Absolutely. Steve, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Adrian. Thanks for everyone watching and listening.
Thanks, Steve.
Take care, brother.